In this video, I'm going to show you the basics of using the paintbrush tool. So, the paintbrush tool is over on the left side, and we can see that it looks like a little bit of a brush. When I click on it, sometimes it'll give me options, sometimes it won't, depending on the different the different setup that you have. Some of the other ones that are there are the pencil tool, the color replacement tool, and the mixer brush tool. All of those have the same hotkey of B, but the paintbrush tool is the most standard. Up near the top, there are a bunch of different ways that we can edit this. And we can see that right now, I have my brush, and I have the way that my brush looks. We can see that this is a soft brush, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. We can see that just like in the little picture, it has a soft edge and more defined in the center. Whereas I can change the hardness, and I can bring my hardness up to a lot higher. And then when I draw it, you can see that there's a little bit of a soft edge, but it's mostly a very strong hard edge. I can also change my size, so I can make it a lot smaller. If I use the left and right bracket keys over my enter key, I can make it larger and smaller really quickly. Also, right-click, and it'll bring up a mini window that'll allow me to change the size and the hardness very quick. A last way to make changes is if I hold down Alt and Control, or Option and Control, and I click and drag, you can see that I can change how big it is. And if I drag up and down, I can change my hardness. And it'll tell me properties about this in a very quick way. So that can be very helpful for those of you that want to work very quickly. I'm going to undo all these. We can remove them out of the scene. And we'll go to the top and kind of look at other things that we can do. Under my brush properties, right now I'm using one of the general brushes, but there's a lot of different ones. There are dry media brushes, wet media brushes, special effect brushes, and lots of things that you guys can download. And so I can come to a variety of different things, such as this dry media brush, and we can see that this has a more jagged edge, and it changes around. Versus if I come to maybe one of the wet media brushes, and I'll use this smudgy one, we can see that that alters it in a different way. I'm going to change it back to a general brush, except I'm going to bring the hardness down just a little bit. You can change the blending mode, but I wouldn't play around with that too much. But that changes how the top layer blends with the bottom layer. I can change the opacity of the brush. And I'm going to change this back to a general brush. I'm going to bring down the hardness a little bit. And the opacity is set to 100%, which means that it will draw really hard. Or if I drop it down, it'll only draw very lightly, meaning that it's transparent. So play around with that to get different effects if you want to build up your layers slowly, or if you want to build up your layers really quickly. You can change the flow, which is how much of the paint comes down at a time, or how little comes in at a time. You can change the smoothing, which means that if I draw a squiggly line, it's not going to change it much. But if I change the smoothing up to like really high and I draw a squiggly line, you can see how there's this delay so that I can create really smooth lines. But it's very slow because it takes more of your computer power. Lastly, there's a couple of other little interesting things, such as the symmetry tool, as well as the brush size tool. This deals with pressure. When you're working with a mouse, you only have one pressure, really hard. So it always stays the same. But if I'm working with a stylus, I can do really light pressure, and then I can do really hard pressure. So turning on those little indicators can play around with whether it is always hard when you touch things, or whether it can be soft and then change to hard. So that is our brush tool. Further ways that you can edit this is over on the right side. There are often properties that you can change. So right here, I have my brush settings, and I can change I can change how my brush looks. So you can see this creates this little jagged mark. This one is a more solid one. This one has fuzzy edges. And you can even download more brushes so that you can get different types. You can also change many options about how the brush works, whether it scatters, whether it's smooth. You can change the direction that it goes in, as well as you can change its spacing. Right now it has 0 spacing, but if I change the spacing, it'll make little dotted lines, depending on what it is that I want my brush to do. I can also come to my brush library, which is the same as the library that was at the top. And you can see here are my different brushes, and I can play around with those very quickly by using the properties, the different palettes on the right of the brush palette and the brush settings palette. So now have some fun with your brushes.